You've seen him everywhere. The man smiling while his soul bleeds out, not in some war zone or hospital bed, but right there in the grocery store checkout line, nodding politely while she dismisses his opinion. Sitting at dinner, explaining himself for the third time this week, standing in his own living room, apologising for taking up space. He thinks he's evolved, patient, the kind of man she said she wanted. But what he doesn't realise is that he's being systematically erased, one yes dear at a time. And the most devastating part? He volunteered for his own destruction. Here's the question that haunts every man but terrifies him too much to ask. Why do women never seem to want what they say they want? She says she wants a good man, then chases the one who barely texts back. She says she values emotional openness, then goes cold when you finally open up. She says she's looking for safety, then runs toward chaos like it's the only air she can breathe. Arthur Schopenhauer didn't see this as feminine inconsistency. He saw it as nature's brutal design. Because here's the pill most men can't swallow. She's not lying to you. She's not manipulative. She's not even confused in the way you think. She's divided. Her words belong to culture. Her desire belongs to biology. And biology always wins. You were raised to believe that love is a negotiation between rational minds. She tells you what she wants. You deliver it, and happiness follows. You've been treating her requests like a user manual for attraction, following every instruction with religious devotion. But Schopenhauer understood something that destroys most modern men. What a woman says and what actually moves her exist in completely different universes. This isn't deception. This isn't manipulation. This is the fundamental split between her conscious mind and her evolutionary programming. Her conscious mind, shaped by movies, therapy, and social conditioning, genuinely believes she wants kindness, emotional availability, and constant communication. She's not lying when she says these things. She really thinks this is what would make her happy. But her primal self, forged by 3 million years of evolution, doesn't care about your good intentions. It only asks one question. Is this man worth following into the unknown? And the moment your entire identity revolves around her approval, her body recoils, not because she's cruel, but because dependence signals danger to her survival instincts. Nature wired her to pull away from anything that feels emotionally desperate, because desperation equals death in the evolutionary game. This creates what I call the Schopenhauer Trap. The more perfectly you become what she says she wants, the further you drift from what actually attracts her. You think you're getting closer to her heart by following her instructions, but you're actually destroying the very polarity that made her notice you in the first place. Watch this tragedy unfold in real time. She says she wants a man who's emotionally available, so you start sharing every feeling that crosses your mind. You tell her about your anxiety at work, your frustration with your family, your doubts about the future. You think you're being vulnerable and authentic. But what she actually feels is overwhelm, not because your emotions are wrong, but because you're dumping them without any container to hold them. You've become emotional chaos instead of emotional depth. She asked for vulnerability, and you gave her instability. She says she wants better communication, so you start explaining everything. Why you made that decision, why you feel this way, why you think she should understand your perspective. You turn every interaction into a dissertation, believing that more information equals more connection. But what she actually experiences is suffocation. She doesn't want to be lectured to or constantly explained at. She wants to feel understood, which happens through presence and attunement, not through verbal bombardment. She says she wants a good man, so you become agreeable to the point of invisibility. You never disagree. You never challenge her. You never assert your own wants or needs. You think you're being considerate and mature. But what she actually encounters is emptiness. She can't respect what she can't feel, and she can't feel a man who has no edges, no opinions, no firm ground to stand on. You've become so nice that you've become nothing. Consider her language versus her reality. She says she wants emotional vulnerability, but what actually moves her is emotional leadership. She wants to see that you can feel deeply without being destabilized by those feelings. She doesn't want to become your therapist. She wants to witness your depth while feeling secure in your stability. When she says she values communication, she doesn't mean she wants constant verbal processing of every emotion and interaction. What magnetizes her is a man who can communicate with his presence, who can say more with silence than most men say with speeches. The man who takes these requests literally starts over-explaining. oversharing, overprocessing every moment. He thinks he's giving her what she asked for, but he's actually suffocating the mystery and strength that made him attractive initially. Here's where most men get destroyed. They fall in love with her social self and build their entire identity around satisfying her stated preferences. They become her emotional support system, her personal cheerleader, her validation dispenser. They think this is love, but there are two women inside every woman, and most men only ever meet the first. The first is her social self, the one who speaks in values and intentions, the one who says she wants emotional safety, deep connection, a man who listens. She believes this completely. She genuinely thinks this version of herself makes the decisions. This social self was programmed by romantic comedies, therapy culture, and feminist ideology that told her what she should want in a partner. It's the version of her that goes to book clubs and talks about healthy relationships. It's the voice that says things like, "I just want someone who respects me," and "communication is everything." This social self is real. It's not fake or manipulative. It genuinely wants these things because it has been taught that these things equal happiness and fulfillment. When she tells you she wants emotional availability, her social self truly believes this will create the love she's looking for. But there's a second woman within her, her primal self. This one doesn't speak. She feels. She doesn't care about your punctuality or your thoughtful texts. She cares about the gravity in your silence, the unshakability in your presence, the strength in your boundaries. This primal self was forged by millions of years of evolution. It's the part of her that assesses whether you can protect and provide, whether you can lead under pressure, whether you can remain stable when her world falls apart. This part of her doesn't care about political correctness or social expectations. It only cares about survival and thriving. And here's the brutal truth. These two selves often want completely different things. Her social self wants you to be emotionally open and available. Her primal self wants you to be emotionally strong and unshakable. Her social self wants constant communication. Her primal self wants meaningful silence. Her social self wants you to be agreeable and accommodating. Her primal self wants you to be decisive and unwavering. Most men only ever interact with her social self. They listen to what she says she wants and try to deliver exactly that. They think they're being good partners by following her stated preferences. But they're unknowingly starving her primal self, which will eventually rebel against the relationship no matter how perfectly they fulfill her conscious requests. And here's the tragedy. While you're desperately trying to please her social self, her primal self is slowly suffocating. Because that part of her was never attracted to safety. She craves polarity, mystery, the electric tension of not knowing what comes next. Schopenhauer saw this dynamic clearly when he wrote about women being instruments of the species. In plain terms, her biology doesn't care about romance. It cares about selection. She is evolution's filter, and filters don't reward effort. They reward energy. That's why the man who tries hardest often loses to the man who simply exists. You think, "But I'm doing everything right," while she thinks, "I just don't feel it anymore." She's living in two realities simultaneously, and if you only respond to her words, you'll lose to her biology every time. This is why devotion without boundaries feels like desperation to her nervous system. When you give her everything too easily, no friction, no edge, no mystery, her body responds with boredom, not desire. She doesn't leave because you're bad. She leaves because you're too safe. You became predictable, explainable, known, and the feminine cannot be magnetized by what it fully understands. Watch what happens when you take her words as gospel. She says, "I want you to be more emotionally available," so you open up like a dam breaking. You tell her your fears, your wounds, your insecurities. You give her honesty and transparency and even tears, and instead of moving closer, she moves away. Now you're confused. You feel punished for doing the right thing. But here's what you missed. She doesn't speak the language of words. She speaks the language of energy. She doesn't hear what you say. She feels what you are. What she was actually requesting when she asked for emotional availability wasn't constant access to your emotional chaos. She was asking, "Can you feel deeply and still lead? Can you stay rooted while I fall apart? Can you let me be emotional without becoming emotional yourself?" That's emotional leadership, and almost no men have it. Most men either shut down completely or become too open too fast. Both approaches are unattractive because both signal that you haven't mastered your own inner world. What magnetizes her is a man who has felt the fire within him and learned to contain it, who can be vulnerable because he's already strong enough to hold that vulnerability without bleeding it everywhere. The man with emotional leadership doesn't avoid difficult emotions. He processes them privately and shares them strategically. He doesn't hide his feelings. He manages them responsibly. He doesn't become cold. He becomes unshakable. When she's having a breakdown, he doesn't join her in the chaos. He becomes the calm center that she can collapse into. When she's angry and testing his boundaries, he doesn't get defensive or explanatory. He stays grounded and addresses the real issue beneath her emotions. When she's pushing him away, he doesn't chase or beg for clarity. He gives her space while maintaining his own center, showing her through his actions that he's secure enough in himself to let her have her process without making it about him. This is what she's actually requesting when she talks about emotional availability. She wants access to your emotional depth, but she wants that depth to be contained within strength. She wants to be able to feel your humanity without having to manage your emotional instability. Think of it like this. She wants to swim in your emotional ocean, but only if she knows you won't drown her. If your emotions are constantly spilling out uncontrolled, she can't trust you to hold space for hers. But if you've learned to navigate your own emotional depths with skill and wisdom, she feels safe to explore those depths with you. She doesn't want to be your emotional crutch. She wants to lean into your strength. She wants to admire your composure under pressure. She wants to feel your stillness when her world is spinning. But the moment you place her on a pedestal and ask her to regulate your emotions, you kill the polarity. You stop being her anchor and become her burden. She's not trying to break you when she creates conflict or seems to pull away. She's trying to feel you, to test the depth of your core through pressure, not through conversation. This is the emotional language she actually speaks. Not explanations, but energy. Not words, but resonance. If you can't speak this language, you'll never touch her soul, no matter how much you talk. Think about the man you were when she first fell for you. He wasn't texting all day asking for reassurance. He wasn't over-explaining every decision or over-accommodating every request. That man was centered. His energy was gravitational. He didn't need her love to feel whole. He invited her into his world but never collapsed around her. She felt it in how he carried himself, how he held eye contact without flinching, how he made decisions without seeking permission. He was rooted in his mission, not in her approval. That energy was intoxicating because it's rare, but it's also terrifying to men who've been taught that nice guys eventually win. You weren't trying to manipulate her. You were trying to earn her love through effort. But effort isn't the currency of attraction, presence is. And the more effort you poured out, the more she realized you were no longer leading. You were orbiting. That's when the respect died. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you became too accessible, too explainable, too comfortable, and comfort without strength becomes boring. Boring becomes predictable. Predictable becomes invisible. So she drifted away. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she stopped feeling you. You transformed from her lover into her emotional employee. And no woman stays attracted to an employee. This is the tragedy no one prepares men for. Unconditional giving without grounding doesn't make her love you more. It makes her love you less. Because when you give everything, you don't just give gifts or time or attention, you give away your spine. And the moment she senses you've abandoned yourself to please her, everything changes. Not because she's ungrateful, but because she can't respect what she can walk on. You stopped being a mountain and became mud beneath her feet. The more available you became, the more invisible you became. She fell in love with a man who had direction, boundaries, mystery. A man who didn't explain himself or perform for approval. A man who simply was. But somewhere along the way, you started believing that love meant giving everything. You thought that holding anything back was selfish or withholding. You confused boundaries with walls and mystery with deception. You started thinking that the more she knew about you, the more she would love you. This is where most men get it catastrophically wrong. They think that love deepens through complete transparency and total availability. They believe that hiding nothing and giving everything demonstrates their commitment and trustworthiness. But attraction doesn't work that way. Attraction requires polarity, and polarity requires difference. When you make yourself completely known and entirely available, You eliminate the very tension that creates desire. She doesn't want to solve you like a puzzle and then be done with you. She wants to be continually intrigued by new layers, new depths, new aspects of your character that reveal themselves over time. She wants to feel like she's with a man who has his own inner world that she gets to explore gradually, not someone who dumps his entire psychological contents on her immediately. You traded your edge for her validation, thinking this was maturity. You thought you were becoming a better man, but you were just becoming easier to leave. Because a woman can't stay attracted to a man she completely understands and totally controls. The man who becomes too known loses his power to surprise her. The man who becomes too available loses his power to be missed. The man who becomes too accommodating loses his power to challenge her growth. And without these powers, love becomes routine. Routine becomes boring, and boring becomes intolerable. Here's what she'll never tell you directly. Deep in her biology, beneath all the words and logic, she's desperate for a man she can admire. Not one who bends to avoid conflict. Not one who begs for scraps of affection. Not one who gives everything hoping to be chosen. She wants to feel drawn to you out of genuine desire, not guilt or obligation. And that only happens when you stop asking who you need to be for her and start deciding who you are for yourself. Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." This isn't about isolation. It's about understanding that the moment you shape yourself around another person's approval, you lose the essence that made you attractive initially. You were never supposed to be her emotional crutch. You were supposed to be her anchor, her reference point for what strength looks like. If you're constantly explaining yourself, fixing things, trying to win her love, you've already lost the polarity. You've traded admiration for access. You've become known, and what is fully known can never again be mysterious. Without mystery, there is no magnetism. The solution isn't to become cold or unavailable. It's to become so grounded in your own purpose that you can be warm without losing yourself in the process. It's to develop the kind of presence that calms storms rather than joining them. When she tests you, and she will test you, she's not trying to hurt you. She's unconsciously assessing whether you can maintain your center under pressure. Can you stay grounded when she's emotional? Can you lead when she's lost? Can you remain yourself when she's pushing you to change? The man who understands this doesn't take her test personally. He doesn't collapse into explanation or defensiveness. He remains steady, present, unmoved by the storm while still being compassionate toward her experience. This steadiness is what her deepest nature finds irresistible, even when her conscious mind complains about your lack of emotional reaction. She wants to surrender, but only to a man whose presence makes surrender feel like safety, not sacrifice. She wants to feel your edges, not your apologies. She wants to orbit something solid, not merge with something shapeless. When her words and her biology are at war, and you only respond to her words, you'll lose to her biology every time. Her social self wants to want you, but her primal self doesn't respond. And she can't explain this contradiction because how do you tell someone you're no longer drawn to the man who loves you most? So she rewrites the story. She says you changed, got too emotional, that she needs space. But what really happened is simpler and more devastating. You collapsed your polarity. You became too known, too predictable, too explainable. This is the modern man's dilemma. He's been taught that love is about equality, sameness, and complete mutual understanding. But attraction is about polarity, difference, and dynamic tension. These two paradigms are fundamentally incompatible. You can have a partnership of equals, but if there's no polarity, there's no passion. You can have complete understanding, but if there's no mystery, there's no magnetism. You can have total security, but if there's no edge, there's no excitement. The modern relationship advice industry has convinced men that they should eliminate all polarity in the name of healthy communication and emotional equality. But this advice destroys the very foundation of romantic attraction. It creates roommates, not lovers. Schopenhauer understood that men and women are fundamentally different creatures with different needs and different ways of experiencing love. Trying to make relationships completely egalitarian destroys what makes them romantic. When masculine and feminine energies blend into sameness, passion dies. This doesn't mean relationships should be unequal or disrespectful. It means they should honor the differences that create attraction instead of trying to eliminate them. The masculine should become more decisively masculine, and the feminine should be free to be authentically feminine. This creates the polarity that generates lasting desire. But modern men have been told that expressing masculine energy is toxic, that taking the lead is controlling, that maintaining boundaries is selfish. So they suppress their natural masculine traits and wonder why their relationships lose passion over time. The path back to your power isn't about becoming harder or less caring. It's about remembering that she fell in love with a man who didn't need her approval to feel worthy. A man who had his own mission, his own boundaries, his own unshakable sense of self. She didn't fall in love with a project that she could mold into her ideal partner. She fell in love with a complete man who invited her into his world without abandoning his own identity in the process. When you start shapeshifting to meet her every preference, you're not becoming more lovable. You're becoming less yourself. And if you're not yourself, who exactly is she supposed to love? Stop trying to be the man she tells you to be. Start becoming the man who doesn't need to be told. Lead from your center. Make decisions from your values. Build your life around your purpose, not her preferences. This doesn't mean ignoring her input or dismissing her needs. It means having such a strong sense of your own direction that you can consider her perspective without losing your way. It means being so secure in your own worth that you can accommodate her without abandoning yourself. The sovereign man listens to her words but reads her energy. He pays attention to what she says but responds to what she actually needs. He understands that sometimes the most loving thing he can do is refuse to give her what she's asking for because he knows it won't actually serve her deeper desires. When she asks you to be more emotional, but you sense that what she really needs is more stability, you provide stability. When she asks you to talk more, but you feel that what she really craves is more presence, you offer presence. When she asks you to be more available, but you recognize that what would actually serve the relationship is more space, you create space. This requires developing the ability to read between the lines, to understand the deeper currents beneath surface requests, to respond to her feminine essence rather than just her mental preferences. It requires trusting your masculine intuition about what the relationship actually needs rather than just complying with whatever she says she wants. Most men are terrified to do this because they've been taught that not giving a woman exactly what she asks for makes them bad partners. But the opposite is true. The man who can't discern between what she says and what she needs will never truly satisfy either her conscious or unconscious desires. The key is developing the wisdom to know when to honor her requests and when to lovingly override them for the good of the relationship. This isn't about being controlling or dismissive. It's about being a leader who takes responsibility for the health and direction of the partnership. When you step fully into your sovereignty, she feels it before you even speak. That's what reignites her respect. That's what brings back her admiration. Not because she owns you, but because she trusts you to remain yourself regardless of what storms arise. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he wrote about the will to power being the fundamental drive of all life. The most attractive thing about a man isn't his willingness to submit to a woman's every preference. It's his commitment to his own authentic expression, combined with his wisdom about how to love her effectively. And if you've lost yourself trying to keep her, it's time to walk back into your own fire. Because the truth is this: when you love from wholeness instead of neediness, when you lead from strength instead of fear, when you choose her instead of needing her, both parts of her can finally say yes to the same man. Her words and her desires align when you become worthy of both her mind and her instincts. That's when you stop being her project and become her choice. That's when love stops being negotiation and starts being magnetism. But this transformation requires something most men aren't willing to do: risk her temporary displeasure for the sake of her long-term attraction. It requires having the courage to be yourself, even when she's asking you to be someone else. It requires trusting that your authentic masculine essence is more valuable than your willingness to accommodate her every request. The man who can do this stops being another option among many and becomes the choice she can't stop making. Not because he's perfect, but because he's real. Not because he gives her everything she asks for, but because he gives her everything she actually needs. If this understanding cuts through the confusion you've been carrying, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your willingness to see through the illusions that keep men trapped in cycles of rejection and disappointment matters more than you know. Your strength matters, your sovereignty matters, and your commitment to becoming someone worth choosing, rather than someone who begs to be chosen, will transform not just your relationships, but every area of your life.